In this Marvel's Midnight Suns video, I kind of want to give you guys my early impressions of the game so far. I've been playing the full game for the last few days, and we're allowed to give you guys our impressions on the first 10 to 20 hours of the game. I probably fall somewhere in the middle there at about 15 hours. And I want to let you guys know what I think, what I like, what I don't like, and kind of give you some information that'll help make you better decide whether you want to play this game day one, or if you might want to wait for a sale. Obviously, we won't be giving a score or anything like that, but I'm just going to kind of give you the general idea of my experience so far and what I liked and didn't like. Let's get into the things that I like about the game so far. First up is the combat. I really like the combat in Marvel's Midnight Suns. It is very fun, it's interesting. I actually like the deck system. If you didn't know how the combat works, essentially you draw 5 cards at the beginning of combat, and you can play 3 of them effectively, and then next turn you'll draw up to 5 cards again, and you can discard a couple cards. So, whatever you don't use will stay in your hand. And if you discard, you will redraw to something else. You get a couple of those. But generally speaking, you get about 3 actions or so a turn, and then you draw cards again next turn. And part of the game is putting the skills you want from a pool of skills for each hero together outside of combat. So there's like a deck building element, although on a much smaller scale than a trading card game would be. But that plays a role in how things pan out in combat, and obviously the heroes you take obviously affects combat as well, because some heroes are DPS oriented, some are tank oriented, some are support oriented, so you kind of want to have a balance of those things when you go into combat, or you may struggle in certain fights. But I really like the tactical nature, and I do think that the deck building element works because it livens things up. You don't have the same abilities, the same 3 abilities you use every turn, because that's the best way to do it. You've optimized exactly specifically what to do, and you never use anything else. That can get really, really old in games like this. And because the skills are randomized, you're sort of figuring out the best way to use those skills or abilities for that turn, depending on what you have. And you have to manage your deck as well. And I really, really like that. I'm a huge fan of trading card games in general. Huge fan of turn-based combat. I think they did a really good job of marrying these 2 things together in this game. The next thing I want to talk about is the voice acting and the writing. I really enjoyed these aspects of the game. Coming from God of War Ragnarok, it was kind of it took me a minute to get used to it, because Ragnarok has such high production value and such good voice acting. But Midnight Suns has really good voice acting and writing as well. It's maybe not as good as that game. And this game isn't a AAA title, in my opinion. It's in that space somewhere between a AA and AAA title when it comes to these things, and the graphics as well. It sits somewhere in the middle, kind of like XCOM did. It's not going to blow anyone away with its graphics, but its voice acting and writing, I feel like, are really, really good. And if you are a fan of Marvel games, I think you will really, really enjoy this aspect of the game. Another thing that I really like about the game is that there is a lot to explore. While you don't explore outside of your home base on the world map or anything like that, there's no world map. You just go into each mission. It's a very mission-based game. You go into, like XCOM, you just go into the mission, do the mission, come back to your home base. Exploring the home base is awesome. Unlike in XCOM or some other games where you're just kind of like in this like view of your ship and you're just looking at like what's happening, or looking at your home base from an exterior point of view, you're actually navigating around, and it is absolutely massive. Things are constantly changing. Places you've already been will have things constantly updated with more things to find, more people to talk to. So exploration-wise, it might not seem like there's a lot of exploration in this game because of the type of game it is, but that home base area is just fun to walk around, and you can spend a lot of time just exploring it, finding things, and I really, really like that element. I also like the amount of customization you have for your character and the different heroes in the game, not only in terms of abilities and passive abilities that they can gain in combat, but also from their visual appearance. With your custom hero, you can do lots of different things. You're constantly unlocking different visual appearances, not only in your home base, but also in combat for your heroes. And it's really fun. I mean, there is some really classic skins there. Some of them are in the store, obviously, which sucks. But the other ones are unlockable in the game, and there's some really, really classic-looking appearances and different things you can do. And I really like the amount there is. You're constantly getting more and more and wanting to try it out. And making your custom hero kind of look this cool way that you want is a lot of fun. I really enjoy that aspect. And the last thing that I really, really like about Midnight Suns is that it's extremely story-driven. This is something that I feel like was really missing from like XCOM-type games. They had a story, but it wasn't like the greatest story or storytelling. They've really focused on that aspect in Midnight Suns, and it almost feels like you're playing a movie in some ways. Obviously not quite as high produced, but it's really, really fun, and the characters are written well, and the lines are written well. So I really like how much story plays a role in the game. If you're someone who doesn't like story-driven games, then Midnight Suns probably won't appeal to you, because you get a lot of gear and equipment from doing story-related activities that have no combat. So they've kind of merged them together into this thing where all the activities you do in the game will reward you with stuff, which I really, really liked, but I think some people may not like that aspect just because of how much story is woven into this game. Personally, I really enjoyed it. So next, let's move on to the cons of the game, the things I don't like. First up, I want to talk about performance. I did not have a very good time with this game performance-wise. I struggled to maintain 60 FPS at 4K with even medium settings of the game on a 2080 Ti graphics card and a 9920 processor. And why that's important to me is that I tried to set the resolution down to 1440 to make my gameplay more smooth because I don't need to play this game in 4K. That's not an option. You literally have full screen at your native resolution of your monitor or windowed, and I didn't want to play on a window. There's no borderless window option and no way to set your resolution down lower. So I couldn't get better performance even if I wanted to unless I went to some small window, which I didn't want to play on. So that was a bit frustrating to see that they didn't have a borderless window option and that you weren't able to change the resolution to lower than your monitor playing in full screen. So that's something I hope they change in the future. I actually did all my recording here at 1080p at medium settings in order to make it fully smooth for you. So you can get better graphics than this. This is not the best the game will look. Just give you a heads up about that. But it was the best way to get smooth recording, so that's why I did it that way. The next thing I want to talk about is how much story in this game there is versus how much gameplay there is. It feels like the vast majority of gameplay is moving around your home base and doing dialogues. Probably, I'd say 80% of the gameplay is that. And it's almost like the combat takes a back seat a little bit. Combats can run really long per encounter because if you fail it, then you restart it over and over a few times before you get it. It can take a while, but assuming you beat it that first time, which I think most people will in most cases, you're getting about 80% running around your home base and having conversations and about 20% actual combat. And unfortunately for me, combat is arguably my favorite part of the game. I mean, I love the story and exploration elements, but at some point I wanted to just get back into combat and I started skipping through some of these in order to get back to combat faster. And I feel like if you're the sort of person that prioritizes gameplay over story and exploration, you might be feeling like there just isn't quite enough for you. And talking about the gameplay and combat for a second, I really, really like the combat of this game. I like the way that it is formulated and the formula they have for the combat. But the enemy variety in this game is absolutely atrocious so far. You essentially fight the same enemy every single mission that you do. The Hydra soldiers, there's maybe 4 or 5 variances of those soldiers and some combination of them every fight, every scenario. In 15 hours, the only difference has been certain supervillains have showed up with those soldiers to fight. But otherwise, you fight them every single scenario. And there are about 5 scenarios in the game so far. Kill all the enemies, rescue something, destroy something, protect something, capture something. That's basically, you just do those same 5 scenarios, and every time you're doing a side quest, it's one of those 5 scenarios, and you have to fight the same enemies over and over. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of Phoenix Point, in that it doesn't feel as well fleshed out as XCOM did when XCOM launched. Phoenix Point was kind of like we have it at home XCOM, and in some ways it feels that way here. The combat itself, the mechanics of it are great, but there's absolutely no enemy variety. And while at the beginning of the game it feels really good and you're playing and you're getting used to the mechanics and you're really enjoying it, at some point you just stop doing the side missions because it seems like they're endless, they're the same. You don't want to just get burnt out doing side mission after side mission after side mission when, you get to the story mission, you're going to be burnt out on the game. So I really, really was hoping for more enemy variety, and I'm hoping that there's more further on in the game because I haven't played all the way through. But at this point, the enemy variety is arguably some of the worst I've seen in video gaming. So to kind of sum up my thoughts on this game so far, I've been enjoying my time with it. I've bunked off work a little bit in order to play more than I should. That's always a good sign to me. Not a lot of games make me do that these days. I play a lot of games, so my standards are very high. So that should tell you something about this game. But the longer that I play the game, the more I start to see that there are issues with the game. Primarily for me, it's the repetitiveness of combat. The mechanics are very good, But the fact that you face the same enemies over and over and your strategies are effectively the same over and over because you're facing the same type of enemies over and over on the same maps over and over with the same scenarios over and over, it gets to be really repetitive at some point. And at the beginning of the game, I was doing all the side quests, trying to level up my characters and get skills, and I was having fun. And at some point, I realized that I was starting to burn out and I better just get on with the main story. Otherwise, by the time I got through all the side missions that I wanted to get through, I wouldn't be interested to get through the main story. And the story missions are better than the side missions, but they follow the same exact formula. Kill everybody on the screen, here are the same types of enemies, throw in a supervillain. That's about the only difference. And really what you're playing this game for ultimately is the story. So if you're not a Marvel fan or you're not a fan of story-driven games, I don't think the combat in this game is going to be enough to satisfy you through the entire game. There'll probably be aspects of it that you really like, and I like the deck building aspect and some of the exploration elements as well. But if you are a turn-based RPG player and you really want that turn-based RPG experience, I don't think this is going to be the game for you unless something drastically changes in the second half of this game. So what do you guys think based on what you've seen so far? Are you guys excited to play Midnight Suns? I haven't heard too many people talking about this game for a while. It seems like their promotion and marketing has been kind of sporadic. I'm just wondering, how much interest is there for this? Do you guys want to see builds for this game? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below.